Hello Moto GP fans. Welcome back to ZNGP Today. Marco Rigamonti, Marc Márquez's longtime crew chief at Ducati, has given a revealing assessment of the 2025 season, one that blends admiration with a subtle warning. Rigamonti says Márquez hasn't always needed to ride at 100% to dominate, and that the Spaniard's true ceiling remains unknown. Francesco Bagnaia's 2025 season reads like a puzzle, a dominant double at Motegi that looked like a return to form, then a rapid slide back into the difficulties that plagued him all year. In a candid end-of-season reflection, Bagnaia admitted he still can't explain the Motegi weekend, and revealed how beam straight highs and baffling lows defined a campaign of unrealized potential. Don't forget to click subscribe button and the bell icon for MotoGP news update. Rigamonti opened with a striking admission: Márquez didn't always have to empty the tank to win in 2025. That observation flips the usual script. Most riders scrape for every tenth to get on the top step. Márquez sometimes builds a margin early, then manages the race with surgical calm. This isn't arrogance, Rigamonti explains, but a deliberate racecraft that conserves tires, energy and mechanical sympathy. Teams that assume they can match him just because they push harder may be missing the point. Márquez often chooses the smarter fight, not the flashier one. What I can say is that this year, there have been races where he hasn't pushed 100%. That restraint turned into a strategic advantage across circuits, the kind of dominance that forces rivals to rewrite their race plans rather than simply increase pace. Rigamonti described a pattern repeated through the season. Márquez will sometimes push aggressively for a few laps to open a gap, then switch into managed mode to protect tires and control risk. It's a hybrid approach, an assault followed by clinical preservation, that maximized points while minimizing exposure to crashes or tire degradation. For competitors, this presents a twofold problem: when to match that initial spike, and whether matching it risks leaving themselves vulnerable later in the race. That's what he told us. Or that he pushed hard for 2 laps, opened up a gap, and then managed the pace. In practice, this makes Márquez unpredictable in its own way. He forces you to respond quickly, then punishes any overcommitment as the race unfolds. Perhaps the most unsettling line for rivals came when Rigamonti admitted he doesn't know where Márquez's limit lies. While the crew chief acknowledged the trade-offs, pushing 100% could yield more speed but also more crashes, he also warned that if forced into sustained maximal exertion, Márquez might reveal even greater capability. That uncertainty is a tactical headache. How do you prepare for a rider whose top end remains uncharted and who has already shown the ability to pick and choose when to use it? For me, in that situation, he can go further, but I can't tell you where the limit is. It's a subtle psychological edge. A reminder that what you see this season may be a curated sample of his full potential. Rigamonti pushed back on the mystique around Márquez's riding, insisting the spectacular recoveries and last-second saves are not supernatural but the product of relentless preparation. He highlighted the cumulative work, setup tweaks in the garage, precise physical conditioning, and the kind of repeated practice that makes extremes feel routine for Márquez. Still, he pointed to those dramatic moments, the times Márquez appears to save a bike from a crash, as where the rider's unique combination of instinct and preparation becomes most visible. The magic he works is when he saves the bike from a crash. Those saves translate into results, laps held together where others would have capitulated, turning near misses into podiums and wins. Marco Rigamonti's assessment is both praise and a warning. Márquez's 2025 season combined tactical restraint, explosive bursts, and a capacity to rescue races that others lose, and crucially, his ceiling is not yet known. For rivals planning how to tackle Ducati next year, the message is clear: expect a rider who can win without always pushing flat out, and be wary of what may happen if he ever chooses to do so. Motegi arrived like a bolt of clarity. After a string of poor results and a pointless home weekend at Misano, Bagnaia tested a different GP24 machine, and whatever the mechanics unlocked translated into on-track magic. He took pole with a new lap record, led every lap of both the sprint and the Grand Prix, and looked for a few days exactly like the rider who dominated in 2024. That weekend delivered pace, confidence, and a bike he said he could do what I wanted with. For a team and rider desperate for a course correction, Motegi felt less like a one-off and more like a possible reset. Because Motegi was the first time this season that I felt back in 24. I was able to do what I wanted with my bike, and the result was quite clear: the lap record, in qualifying, then winning both races with gap. The performance there was complete: pole, sprint, and GP wins, and it briefly rewrote the narrative that had been accumulating all season. The emotional high of Motegi evaporated almost instantly. The very next rounds returned Bagnaia to harsh reality: a difficult, crash-marred weekend in Indonesia, a frustrating outing at Phillip Island, and further inconsistencies that punished any momentum. The swing was extreme, from dominating the podium at Motegi to struggling for pace and control when the bike became quite uncontrollable in some situations. Those events weren't isolated bad days. They were symptomatic of a deeper mismatch between rider and machine that reappeared unpredictably and hit results hard. And then I was back to reality in Indonesia, and it was maybe the worst weekend I had in Moto GP. That sequence underlined the season's central tragedy: flashes of brilliance undermined repeatedly by instability that no quick fix could erase. Sepping offered another brief upswing. After missing Q2 on Friday due to mistakes, Bagnaia salvaged pole and converted it into a sprint victory, a sign that when the package worked for him, he could still be dominant. Yet even here the rider himself drew a distinction. While the Sepping sprint margin was technically larger than at Motegi, the feeling was different. The Malaysian weekend showed Ducati's capacity to rebuild performance day by day, but it also exposed that rhythm and confidence remained fragile and episodic rather than steadily improving. Japan, honestly, is where I had the best feeling on my bike this season, more similar to my feeling from last year. Sepping proved that progress was possible, but it also reinforced that Motegi-level weekends were still the exception, not the rule. Bagnaia didn't sugarcoat the real issue: adaptability. He identified himself as not a good adapter to what I don't like, admitting that changing riding feelings and unexpected bike movement are his weak points. When the GP25 started to shake or present corner entry quirks, his instinct was to close the gas, a sensible survival reaction but one that prevents consistent lap time extraction and makes development work harder for engineers. The season's pattern: mid-year deterioration, brief recoveries, and then late non-scores capped by a puncture and mechanical misfortune, all trace back to this mismatch between rider preference and machine behavior. Honestly, I'm not a good adapter to what I don't like. This is my weak point, and even if I'm working on it, it's difficult to improve. That frank admission transforms the Motegi mystery into a technical and human dilemma. Is the solution setup, a different machine, or incremental work on Bagnaia's adaptation? So far the answers have been partial at best. Francesco Bagnaia's 2025 season will be remembered for its contradictions, moments that reminded everyone of the champion he can be, offset by stretches that exposed a fragile fit with a bike his team engineers could not always stabilize. Motegi and Sepping offered hope. Mandalika and Phillip Island delivered frustration. As Bagnaia and Ducati regroup, the central task is clear: translate those Motegi flashes into repeatable form. Until someone can explain what truly happened in Japan, Bagnaia's campaign will remain an intriguing, unfinished chapter in this season's story. Thanks for watching ZNGP Today, and this is your Moto GP news update. And see you next time!